Right. I sent you an email, and by the way, no problem. I'm being late. I have to appreciate
Excuse me.
the coverage of Ukraine because people on the left in America, especially, have been so bad on that. It's been really disappointing. And so you've actually, I can't be mad about waiting for that. Um.
Oh,
So I originally. Oh,
don't
go ahead.
don't thank me too much. I do it exclusively for the bitches. And also I would have talked sooner, but I'm fighting back a cough right now. Anyway,
Oh, you're good.
I probably can't talk for long on account of that. So hit me with your position and then we'll scream at each other if we need to or not if we don't and then we'll yeah, it'll be good.
Sure. So I emailed you about black nationalism and black separatism. Specifically, what I emailed you is that, and I'm an anarchist. So my position being that it's possible, obviously not inherent, but possible to be both of those things and not necessarily take an anti-white position. I also said earlier that I'm not in any way trying to defend or excuse Professor Flowers. This isn't about her. I haven't even watched that debate. I didn't really want to get involved with it. So, um,
Wise.
right. Uh, but in my experience, and I've talked with a lot of people who have or know people who have positions in this area. My argument is that the concept of black nationalism and black separatism being not exactly analogous to white nationalism, white separatism would be similar in the way that Black Panthers using black power is not the same thing as white people using white power. But I want to clarify because that's not going to, explain it on its own. There is a difference between wanting to be separate from white people and wanting to be separate from white supremacy. And I don't think that a black separatist who wants to be separate from white people is doing a good thing. If you are trying to exclude white people from your, for example, let's say you're trying to make a commune out in the woods. If you're trying to exclude white people, I don't think that's a productive, thing to do. But I don't think that's also a realistic thing that you can do because then you have to develop an entire racial theory and a litmus test of who counts as white and who doesn't. And well, what if you have a white father and a black mother? And what if your boyfriend's white and you want to bring him, right? It doesn't really pan out. And I think that what it's more about is creating a society, for example, an anarchistic mutualistic commune outside of the existing white supremacist system in society where people can, in an essence, at least have some function of, you know, racial equality. And so I don't see it so much as trying to exclude white people as to escape the white supremacist system. And you can have white people without white supremacy.
All right. I mean, if you want to escape the white supremacist system, then it's just definitionally not black separatism, right? You know, black separatism specifically has to be about the attempt to create a society with only black people, because if you're trying to excise that prejudice, I mean, that's just creating any other type of society, right? I don't think that black and white nationalism and separatism are perfectly analogous at all. I only think that they're both bad for the same reasons. Their difference is primarily one of scope, because white supremacy has obviously got a lot more weight to it here in the West and also, in fact, everywhere. So,
Yeah.
it's really a broader issue with that. The issue that I have is like, if you want to create, first of all, I don't know what you mean by create a system without white supremacy. Because if you mean form a new country, good luck, right? If you mean like form a commune, something out there, well, the thing is, white supremacy isn't just interpersonal racism, it's systemic. And even if a bunch of black people went out and made a commune in the woods, you're not really rid of the systems that preceded or affect you afterwards. You're still going to be subject in any interaction you have with broader society to those systems, even if everyone at your little commune ain't racist. I mean, if that was the case, then you could make a household, a family, you could marry someone and have kids, and they're all not racist, and that's like you doing a sort of black separatist escape from racism. But of course, it's not that simple, right?
So for the most part, I agree with what you're saying. I want to clarify because I do think that, well, for one, I am not an advocate of these ideas in the sense that I think that it is possible to hold these ideas without being an anti-white racist. But I'm
What
not.
what
I don't.
ideas?
The idea that you want to, for example, uh, create a commune. No, not Black Hammer style, obviously. Those people are fucking idiots. But, you want to create, say, go out and create a commune and live in the woods. And obviously, you can only minimize but not eliminate interactions with society. But, maybe if you have some ability to create a commune and go live out in the woods to minimize your systemic interactions with society and try to sort of rely on mostly just mutual aid within the community as opposed to the society at large. I believe in reformism. I believe in working from within the system to change things. That is my belief in what will make things the best for everybody, because we can overall, affect change against systemic racism. I just wouldn't hold it against individual people if they wanted to say, nope, fuck that, I'm out of the system and go live in the woods. That's all I'm saying.
Well, sure, but that's just an advocacy for communes, right? That doesn't have like a black separatist element to it. At the end of the day, I'm fine with people wanting to go off and make their own path or whatever, but as soon as that logic ends people up at, like I want to go live away from X racial group, that's where I have to, I have to oppose it. But anything preceding that, I'm completely fine with.
Also, I see anarcho-reformism in the chat. I just want to ask, if you're an anarcho-revolutionary, then you're a suicidal. Do you want me to go shoot up the government and get killed by a cop right now? Because that's what you're advocating. Revolution right now in the United States could not ever succeed. It couldn't succeed without a majority of the population and the government on your side. So unless you want to die, then supporting a revolution at this time is just stupid. But going back to what you said,
it might not succeed right now. You don't know what the
right now, but we could work to create the conditions in the future, and that's what I support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just want to clarify, because people love to call anything that isn't straight up, let's go shoot the congressman. People love to call that liberal, but I think that you also have to be pragmatic enough to recognize when you can win and when you can't. But sorry, I'm sidetracking. So I think this is ultimately a semantics argument in what is considered and is not considered Black nationalism and Black separatism. Because from the people that I have spoken to that have called themselves Black separatists, what they have said that they want is effectively to just go live in a commune out in the woods. And you can, if you want to, I guess you could say that they're not truly Black separatists.
Well, but with people, like, did they say a commune with no white people? Or
no, they said a commune out in the woods, for example, or in the mountains or wherever have you. Maybe it's by a river, who knows? But a commune somewhere out in the wilderness, probably, which is, primarily for the purpose of escaping white supremacy. That doesn't mean they're not white people, because of course, again, you'd need to develop a racial theory to determine who counts as Black for that. And at this point, you're basically, could you do the reverse of the one drop of white blood means you're not really Black and shit like that? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then I've never, in all the time I've done this, I've never spoken out against the idea of forming communal societies where you try to escape the worst, external factors of a prejudiced, a prejudiced country.
I do think that part of the problem is that you've been exposed to the absolute worst elements of this quote ideology, and the people that you've spoken to have happened to be the Farrakhan end of the spectrum, or the Marcus Garvey types who think, Black Hammer, didn't they do a partnership with the Proud Boys? I know Marcus Garvey teamed up with the KKK.
I think that is the ideology. I mean, you're literally describing both the historical and the modern foundations of Black separatism.
Right. And so I think that for a lot of I won't say that necessarily even that isn't more often than not what it is. I'm just saying that in my experience, I have met over a dozen people who have claimed to subscribe to the ideology and have never once spoken about excluding white people from groups. Or
why Black separatism? I mean, what is that? If Black separatism was being sort of decoded into just this generic term for creating communes. You know, I just wonder if you're not getting run about a little bit, right? I mean, white separatists or white nationalists, when they talk about their ideology, they're usually like, oh yeah, well, we don't want to like ban all black or brown people from the country. We just want the right of free association to determine authentically where we want to live and that kind of thing, you know?
Well, yes, but also usually they will say something along the lines of, we can eliminate having black people in the country peacefully. They'll just want to leave, or something along those lines.
If you press them, but have you pressed these people? Because you have to press the white supremacists or the white nationalists.
Yeah, no, you do. And now, okay, I cannot say absolutely with 100% certainty that because obviously I can't read these people's minds. But this is a conversation that I've had, because I used to be just entirely like, you know, separatism, nationalism, always bad, always inherently wrong. And I'm still very suspicious of it. I still think that it is something that we should always look at with side eyes, because it is a very easy way for identitarian sentiment to come from. I actually sent her the email, like, this is not a Robin DiAngelo bit, because I'm like, for example, to feel white guilt, you need to be a white identitarian. You need to associate yourself with the deeds of white people in the past in the same way that somebody who's a white supremacist does. So I don't believe in any of that bullshit.
I agree. The problem of essentialization. Yeah.
Right. I think that ultimately what this comes down to is, people, maybe are they trying to reclaim the term black supremacist and make it into something not like that. I don't know why they choose to use the term that they do. I can't tell. Like, obviously there are tons of people who have used that term in a negative way.
Well, I mean, I can't really speak to it. Look, I'm principally against the concepts, not the terminology. If people are describing something that I'm generally, you know, well disposed towards, they're just using it, just referring to it with terminology that I'm not really that fond of, I wouldn't like have an issue with what they're doing or anything.
Ultimately, I think that's what's going on. I think that maybe it is a reclamation of the term, or maybe it's a fact that the term has been used in a way that is not really well known. I don't know what it is, but because I obviously don't support, you know, segregation.
But that's what they all say, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's what you say too, Vaush.
It is what I say, isn't it?
But I believe you. That's the thing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think that when you say that, you're telling the truth. And I would hope that you would extend that same charity to me.
Yes, I believe you too. If we were to say I do say that, you know, I've made some contradictory statements in the past. But yes, no, I completely understand. I do think there has to be room broadly for discussions, not necessarily like the one we're having right now, but I guess about the idea of forming kind of parallel societies without this reflexive worry of black separatists. Because of course, and I hope my audience would understand this, but I know they don't necessarily, the problem of black separatism is a virtually non-existent one in the modern world. Like in America, like people are not experiencing problems because of black separatism. It's just not a thing that's happening. So
oh yeah,
problems, you know, responses should be proportioned to problems as much as is possible.
So it's never been a majority movement in any real, you know, sense, as far as I can tell. And it's also not anything that I think that, even if it was to only, let's just pretend for a moment that it was only expressed in the definition that I'm using, it would still be a vast minority, because most people do not want to pick up and leave society and go live in the woods. That's already going to be a tiny percentage of the population.
100%, yeah.
And obviously I would oppose anything involving, you know, separatism that seeks to draw strict ethnic lines and define people in those groups and include or exclude them based on that, because that's inherently harmful, I believe. But if your separatism is not separatism based on racial or ethnic lines, but for example, separatism Well, for example, let's say that you made a commune where you were like, we don't want anybody who is a white supremacist in this commune. Not no white people, but just people who are like, who act in a racist way. We don't want them.
Well, that
I think
seems
that's
nice
different.
enough.
Yeah. I think that, because there's a very big difference between excluding people for their ideologies and excluding people for essentialist traits.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, I don't really think communes could properly function. My goodness, some wacky stuff going on back there, huh?
Oh, sorry. I sat down on my chair and it's a little squeaky.
That's okay. My chair was super squeaky till I replaced it either. No, I completely agree. Yeah, it's just about proportioning this stuff appropriately. I don't have any particularly spicy takes following that though. I guess if you're ever interested, I would be interested to see if you had any particular prescriptions following a watch of that Professor Flowers conversation, mostly because while I don't think black separatism is much of a political problem at the moment, I do think that people weaponizing the language of progressivism in a reactionary manner kind of is. And that debate kind of felt like the epitome of that to me, at least.
I mean, I hate that. Like, and it's very common. And how many times have you seen, Republicans or, the right wing in this country call somebody a racist or a misogynist because they, denigrated a black woman for saying something awful, right? So obviously weaponizing woke language in a reactionary manner, Candace Owens obviously is very, very easy. I think that while I haven't seen the Professor Flowers video, the memes about, well, they should just have the, what was it? They should have self-determination rights to do what they want with the oppressors. Like, yeah, obviously that is a very dangerous idea that could easily lead to something like genocide happening. And I would say that they should have self-determination to, do what they want, not kill people, not deport people. That's not self-determination. That's the ability to decide for other people, right? Everybody should have self-determination.
Yeah, like you said, it's an essentialization thing. I feel like a lot of people are under the mistaken impression that white supremacy or white nationalism or European colonialism are intrinsic and inherent products of those things, as opposed to just one iteration of many, which could have existed instead.
Well, like it's totally possible in the future, this is not, because I know that this is also like a Nazi meme. It's possible in the future that there could be black supremacy, right?
Anything could have happened. Like, we could have lived in a world where, yeah, Africa ended up being like the dominant colonial power. We could have ended up in a world where the Aztecs and the Mayans ended up being the dominant colonial power, and you had this like Mesoamerican supremacist. Right, like we don't know. Like things roll.
It's contextual, because me having a light skin tone gives me an advantage in this place and in this time, but it would not necessarily in another place at another time.
And it is
not an essential trait.
I just feel like a lot of people don't appreciate how potentially destructive it can be to oppose not the concept of supremacy or exclusion, but rather to oppose supremacy and exclusion being done by the current hegemonic group and further. It's like, well, this can always be dangerous.
There is a reification element to it. There's a reification in the same way of like capitalist realism, where people reify the concept of trade into capitalism, and bartering is capitalism. People reify white supremacy, but it's really only something that's existed for 500 years, right? And before that, we had different racial understandings of groups of people. The ancient Romans had the understandings that there were three groups of people. Well, there were four, really. There were the Mediterranean Chad humans. There were the Northern barbarians. There were the African Moors, and then there were the East Asians. And those were the four races. And, then the Norse were, angry Unga Bunga cavemen who were bad and should be looked down
upon. They thought they were like subhuman, basically. They thought they had blood, or thick blood from the cold, and it was the people of the Middle East who had thin blood, and the thin blood allowed it to run more cleanly through their bodies, which gave them quick wits, and it was the thick blood which clogged the humors of the Nordic folk, which is one of what made them aggressive and warlike.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the concept of white supremacy and the way that we know it has existed for roughly, 600 years, maybe. No long. It doesn't go back farther than that because that's really the beginnings, of this transatlantic slave trade. And that's when we look at what we needed to come up with an excuse for why it's okay to enslave these people. Let's develop a racial caste system where we're at the top so that we can economically exploit them. But before then, that wasn't happening, so we didn't need to that. There were literally medieval black European knights, and and there's explicitly like descriptions of them in text because obviously in the medieval period, there's a different connotation in Europe, for example, to calling someone black. So there's a great text of this guy called the Black Knight, who they specify, and we don't mean he had black hair, and we don't mean that he had very dark eyes, but we mean that his skin was very, very dark, and that's why we're calling him the Black Knight.
Well, there were a lot of Moors who made their way up, like from the Mediterranean, I think, for like a good bit of medieval European history, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And there was multiple black Roman emperors, and no, it's a the ancient and medieval periods were much more diverse than people imagine them to be in terms of Afro-Eurasia was a very, especially with Northern Africa and Europe, there was a lot of travel and intermixing between the peoples there.
I think we can agree then the most important lesson from all this is that black people can be evil and powerful too. It's very important.
True.
Always know.
Second Joker moment, but true.
I with my very limited energy for streaming at the moment, I'm going to take some time to finish up the few segments that I had on my plate today. I appreciate you hopping on.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if we didn't scream at each other.
I'm okay with that. I'm not mad at you that we didn't scream at each other.
I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, I hope you do too. Take it easy, Vaush.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.